Alright, now that you have a basic understanding of what bonds are, why people buy them and why they issue them, we can go a little deeper and learn about bond characteristics. All bonds have at least 4 characteristics and most have 5. We're obviously going to cover all 5. Starting with the price, aka market price, which is the amount that you pay to buy or sell the bond in the open market. This is the price that we see, the price that the bond trades at. Now, strictly speaking, we also have what's called a fair price, and that's the intrinsic value of the bond. That's the fair price of the bond. And that's what we want to compare to the market price. If the market price is greater than the fair price, we say that the bond is overvalued, and therefore you shouldn't buy it. If, on the other hand, the market price is lesser than the fair price, then we say that the bond is undervalued, and therefore you should go ahead and buy it, because you're getting a bargain. Lastly, of course, if the fair price is equal to the market price, then that's fine too, right? You can still go ahead and buy it because you're paying a fair price for it. The market price is then the price that you pay to be entitled to earn the payoffs from the bond. Remember, in the previous video we said that there's different kinds of payoffs. You could either get interest only, or you could get the lump sum payment, or you could get both. Regardless of what the payoffs are, you would pay the price in order to earn those payoffs. Next up, we've got the par value, which is the amount owed at the bond's maturity. So this is the lump sum payment that we talked about previously. And we also call this the face value, or the redemption value, or the nominal value, or the principal. They're all different terms for exactly the same thing, which is the par or the par value. Now, this is pretty consistent with finance as well as accounting for that matter. We come up with loads of different terms to describe exactly the same thing, mainly because it makes us sound really clever and intelligent. But not to worry, we've included a Jargon Buster so you can get used to the terms without getting overwhelmed or intimidated. Next up then, we've got the coupon and the coupon rate. The coupon is the interest paid per period. Remember, in the previous video we looked at annual interest payments of $50. Well, the coupon was $50 in that example. Now, the coupon rate is the coupon expressed as a percentage of the par. In other words, the coupon rate is the coupon divided by the par. You take a single coupon that you're earning, divide it by the par value, and you've got your coupon rate, which we tend to express as a percentage. Crucially though, while the coupon is the interest paid and the coupon rate is the coupon expressed as a percentage of the par, the coupon rate is not the interest rate of the bond. That title is reserved exclusively for the yield, and we'll look at that in a bit. I really can't stress this enough though, the coupon rate is not the interest rate of the bond, even though we're dealing with the interest paid. Oftentimes I see people describe the coupon rate as the interest rate only to bite themselves later on because it gets rather confusing. Throughout this course, I'm never going to call the coupon rate the interest rate, and I strongly urge you to refrain from doing the same. So do not call the coupon rate the interest rate because you're setting yourself up for confusion, but more importantly, it's just not right. On to the next one then, maturity, which refers to the lifetime of the bond, aka time to maturity. This is the time period of the bond. So if a bond has a 10-year maturity and it pays coupons and the lump sum, or the par, that means that it's going to pay coupons every year for 10 years, and in the 10th year, i.e. when it matures, when it reaches its maturity, it will pay the lump sum payment, aka the par value. Now, it's tempting to also describe this as the duration of the bond, but please do not do that, as that's a totally different concept. So the maturity is the lifetime of the bond, it's how long the bond will last for, and it's the date or year when you'll earn the par value. Last but certainly not the least, the most important characteristic of all bonds is the yield to maturity, or the yield. This is the effective interest rate of the bond. It's the bond's internal rate of return, aka IRR. Of course, there's different terms that we use to describe it, including the yield to maturity, or YTM, the effective rate, as well as the internal rate of return. Like I said, this is the most important characteristic of the bond, and unlike the coupon rate, this is the interest rate of the bond. The yield shows you the return that you'll earn on an annualized basis, or a semi-annual basis, or a quarterly basis, depending on how you're seeing it, but it shows you that return given the time value of money as well as other risks. Now, we're going to discuss all of these risks extensively when we cover the fundamentals in the next section. For now, all you need to know is that this is the effective interest rate of the bond, it shows you the return that you'll earn, and this is the crucial ingredient for pricing bonds. Now, given that the yield shows you the return that you'll earn. Well, you're earning the return only because someone is paying it, right? So remember we said we need to understand bonds from the buyer's perspective as well as the issuer's perspective. Likewise, in the case of the yield to maturity, from the buyer's perspective, it shows you the return that you'll earn, but from the issuer's standpoint, the yield can be thought of as the effective cost of borrowing, aka the cost of debt, in a certain sense. Now, the price and the yield have an incredibly powerful relationship. They're inversely related to one another so that the price decreases as the yield increases and the price increases as the yield decreases. You may or may not have heard that bond prices are susceptible to interest rates, and that is precisely because of this relationship. When interest rates increase, the yields increase, and so the price of bonds decrease. And similarly, when interest rates decrease, the yield decreases, and so the price of bonds increases. Another important relationship is the one between price and payoffs, and they maintain a proportional relationship so that the price increases as the payoffs increase, ceteris paribus. Now, ceteris paribus is just a fancy word for essentially saying everything else remains constant. So all other things being constant, if the coupons increase and or the par increases, then the price will increase. And likewise, everything else being constant, if the coupons and or the par were to decrease, the price of the bond will decrease. Alright, hopefully that makes sense. Let's just have a quick recap of the 5 characteristics again, because it's really important and it's something we're going to be working with throughout the course. The price, remember, is the price that you pay to buy or sell the bond. This is something that we compare to the fair price, which is the price we get by valuing the bond, such that if the market price is greater than the fair price, then we say that the bond is overvalued and therefore you shouldn't buy it. If the market price is lesser than the fair price, we say that the bond is undervalued and therefore you should buy it. And lastly, if the market price is equal to the fair price, then the bond is fairly priced and therefore you could go ahead and buy it as well. Next, we learn that the par value is the amount owed at the bond's maturity, so that's the lump sum payment that you get once the bond matures. The coupon is the interest paid every period. The coupon rate is the coupon divided by the par, but crucially, the coupon rate is not the interest rate of the bond. That title is reserved exclusively for the yield, which is the effective interest rate of the bond, or the bond's internal rate of return, or IRR. Now, the IRR is essentially an investment appraisal tool or technique, and we talk about what the IRR is and how to calculate it in great detail in one of our other courses on investment appraisal mastery. For the purpose of this course, it's useful if you know what the IRR is, but by no means is it essential, because we're going to teach you how to calculate the yield from scratch anyway. Finally, we learned that the maturity is the lifetime of the bond, or the time period of the bond, and we said that you should refrain from calling this the duration of the bond, because that's a whole other topic. Alright, so now that you've understood what the characteristics of bonds are, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the notations that we're going to use in this course, because they really make life a lot easier. I'm going to refer to the price as P. I might call it P subscript T to denote the price at some particular time T. We're going to call the par value par, the coupon C, and the coupon rate CR. Next, I'm going to call the yield Y or YTM, and just remember that the YTM is the same as the IRR, so this sign here just means that these two are equivalent, they're exactly the same thing. This fact will become very useful when we learn how to calculate or estimate the yield to maturity. Now, for the most part, I'm going to use YTM, but sometimes I'm also going to call it Y. I'm going to switch between the two, but I'll try and be reasonably consistent. Finally, I'm going to call the maturity capital N or little n. I'll end up using little n more in the equations and capital N when we're looking at timelines. Some people also call it T. I reserve T exclusively for some particular time period, but when I'm defining the maturity, I'll always call it N, so I'll be quite very consistent with that throughout this course. Now, there are some additional notations that we've used in the more advanced concepts, but we'll introduce these notations later on, so you don't get overwhelmed by it now, because we're not going to be using those notations for the first half of the course anyway. Just as a final slide, we've included a Jargon Buster, so you always know that all of these different terms mean exactly the same thing. For the most part, I'm going to be quite consistent using the primary term. I might end up calling it these things as well, but generally speaking, I'll try and use the primary terms. Alright, hopefully that makes sense. If any part of this video is not clear, please go back to it and watch it, because we're going to be working with these characteristics quite heavily throughout the course, and you do need to know these characteristics so you can follow through with the rest of the course easily. In summary then, we learned that bonds have 5 characteristics, including the price, par, coupon, maturity, and the yield. Strictly speaking, some bonds don't have all characteristics. For instance, we know that some bonds don't pay interest, or they don't pay coupons, so they won't have the coupon, for instance. Other bonds don't pay the par value, they only pay coupons, so they won't have a par value. In the general case though, bonds tend to pay the par and the coupon, so they will have all 5 characteristics. So most bonds do have all 5, some bonds only have 4. Additionally, we learned that while the coupon is the interest paid and the coupon rate is the coupon divided by the par, the coupon rate is not the interest rate of the bond. That title is reserved exclusively for the yield, aka yield to maturity, which is the effective interest rate of the bond, or the internal rate of return of the bond. In the next few videos, you learn about the types of bonds as well as their payoff timelines. We'll also talk about bonds' trading statuses, as well as ratings, including what they are and how they work. All of these topics will help ensure that you get the basics right so that you're in a strong position to be able to deal with more complex problems as you progress on with the rest of the course. Alright, that's enough from me for now. Have a go at the quiz, and I'll see you in the next video.